Um, hello, you are there. Thank you very much. So we have your pardon me, we have your submission, and you've got 10 minutes. Just give us the highlights of things that you want us to make particular note of. Thank you.
So I guess, first of all, the why is really missing for me, and the proposed changes. I really struggle to see the benefits for anyone, including the council. It just really feels overall anti-dog to me. I've sort of seen what's happening with a lot of other councils, and they really seem to be focusing on fostering good ownership, doing things like creating more dog parks and allowing dog access in various areas, doing simple things like providing poo bags, etc. Whereas this proposal is obviously, one of the things is to reduce the number of parks and obviously restrict where dogs can go and whatnot. So it, as I said before, it just feels really anti-dog, but without the real benefits or the why. So overall, I don't agree with what the proposed changes are, but the key things that sort of stand out for me is one, the requirement for the greater than 2 dogs permit. I myself has been involved in dog sports for a number of years now, dog obedience and dog agility specifically, and in those sports, you must, as part of it, you must have a well-trained and well-looked after dog. Also, as part of that, majority of people actually do have more than 2 dogs. So that's sort of, by creating that need for a permit and potentially restricting the amount of dogs that a person can have in a rural location, just the impacts of that need to be thoroughly considered, because again, coming back to what I said previously around the benefits of these changes, they just don't seem to be there, but the impacts to making these changes is significant for many dog owners. Secondly, if you look at the aspect of fostering and rescues, by creating that need for a permit of greater than 2, then you are then reducing the ability of your fosterers. So then in turn that creates greater strain on your rescues, which I think would then have a greater impact on council as well, because then you end up with more dogs in pounds and etc. So that's a further drain on council as well. And the other sort of main concern I had was the removal of dog parks and the proposed rule changes. So being in a rural location, for many, you can't just walk out the door and take your dog for a walk. It's simply not safe on our roads. So the reliance that we have on access to those parks is significant. By removing access to those locations, one or two things will generally happen. You either have to travel further to go to be able to find a park that you can access, typically in Hamilton City or Raglan, both of which is a significant drive. Or what for a lot of people will happen, they won't have the time nor the money to be able to go further to access what should be really a basic resource in our community. And then what happens is you have dogs that are unexercised, so they're bored, and that creates more issues. You get dogs that then break out of home because they're not getting the exercise that they need, and getting into trouble, or you get dogs that bark because they're bored. So then again, you got further drain on council resources, not to mention the health and well-being of the animal and the owners, to be fair, as well. And so how do you provide the resources to manage that? I mean, yeah, I just think it's just really short-sighted, and as I said previously, really, really anti-dog. And I also feel like, from what I've seen of the council meetings, and it almost feels like it's a predetermined outcome, that that people aren't actually being listened to, and there's an overwhelming amount of support for people saying, hey, we just don't agree with these changes, but it just feels like it's already predetermined that these changes are going through. So that as being a member of community under this council is really, really disappointing. So I really hope that you do listen to all the submissions that you're receiving, and take time to think about what the value is, and do you actually have the resources to even manage these changes, which it's clear that there isn't, because they're, with 3 dog control officers, how are you going to, manage what you're proposing? It's just impossible. So I think that's everything I kind of wanted to say. So thank you for your time for listening, and please.
Thank you. I've got a question, and some of the others may as well. Just one point first. I can assure you nothing is predetermined. What you see is discussions getting a proposal to a draft stage, and then it's at that draft stage now where we're seeking the input. So that then goes on. All of the submissions will go into, and the points raised through the hearings will go into a deliberations report, and at that point we then start looking at what we're making decisions on. So I can assure you there's no
I guess I understand what you're saying in terms of the process. Yes, I'm not disagreeing that process is not going to be followed, but by the overall attitude of some of the mayor and some of the councillors, it seems very clear that there's a real drive to make these changes. So I was disappointed by the behaviour that I've seen, and the lack of leadership, and just some blatant unprofessional comments. And by some of those comments, it's very hard to believe that these outcomes haven't, these decisions haven't already been made. So yes, I appreciate there's a process, but just by the overall attitude of some of those councillors, it's hard to believe that they're listening with open ears.
So I can remind you, you do have 14 pairs, I can't count them, 14 pairs of ears here listening to you. And just a question that I've got for you is, you mentioned about rural dog owners going and using dog parks, and we've also heard a lot from rural dog owners who say that they don't use the dog parks because they've got plenty of their own land. So I'm just wondering, it's...
Well, I'm talking about, the Tokowhai specifically. I can only speak to the area that I'm based in. So in Tokowhai and Whotawhata, obviously one of the proposed changes is to not allow dogs on those parks anymore. Is that correct? Which those parks overall, I think, are underutilised resources, full stop, regardless of dog owner use.
But Councillor Smith explained that. I think he's got his hand raised. So, Councillor Smith.
Thank you to help the submitter. Good afternoon, Ms. Brown. We are not taking away Tokowhai and Whotawhata. What we are doing is restricting the playing field surface to humans to play on with the sports, with the high use of those grounds by the school and at weekends. What is permitted is to have the dog on a leash on the sidelines, or at all other times when it's not being used as a sports field, to have access to the perimeter and the non-playing surface. So I think there's a misunderstanding. And so we're not actually taking them away in their entirety, just controlling the use so it's a safer playing surface without the defecation and so on the field.
Yeah, and I guess I think that's, in reality, that's a very, very hard thing to achieve. If you're saying, your dog is allowed on the park, but in these areas only, well, you're talking about a minimal amount of space. and are you saying that that's on lead only? I mean, that sort of defeats the purpose of being able to free run your dog. So in theory, you are losing a resource to be able to, allow your dog to stretch his legs. Then meaning that if you want your dog to be able to go for a run around, then you literally have to get in the car and drive, quite a significant distance. So that is quite a big impact to a dog owner. As for, I hear what you're saying about, dog poo being on a playing surface. But in all honesty, I think like any situation, you're going to get owners that are just bad owners, but I still think that's the minority. And by doing what other councils have done, where they've got the dog poo supply bags there that are, as a dog owner, you should be responsible in carrying them yourself. I know, I realise that, but just doing basic things like that, where other councils have done that will then, help alleviate that problem.
Thanks, Ms. Brown. That's really helpful. I'm sorry, Councillor Smith. The time is well up. I'm sorry.
We are working on another field. We can't extend the village green at the moment. We are working on alternatives. So
your time is up, I'm afraid. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you. We appreciate that you took the time to do this, and you've given another interpretation. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, we
don't have anyone in the waiting room, and the next person isn't due on till 2:10.
Right, and so do we assume that Ms. West and Mr. Roger are not joining us?
Yes, no, they have cancelled.
They have cancelled? Okay. Right,
And
so we have
dogs for deaf people have been moved to 2:20.
Okay. Right, okay. So when we come back, we will have Ms. Hawkins?
Yes.
Okay, so we